Hey everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're gonna make this beautiful, sunny and colorful place. So let's begin this tutorial. So first let's open a plane and let's rotate it on the x-axis by Rx and 90. Go to edit mode and scale it up. Go to your edge select and select this edge and G and X. And then we're gonna give it some thickness. Select everything and press E to extrude it. Something like this. And then we're gonna open a circle, Shift A circle and Rx90. Let's go to front view by pressing 1. Edit mode and vertex select. And select these vertices here. And X and vertices, we don't need them. And then E and Z to extrude it. And then select everything and fill it. And then we're gonna extrude it. Something like this. And G and Y. And then we're gonna make it smaller. And move it up. And let's search for array modifier. And then we're gonna type in 1.1. So we have some space here. And maybe this is not enough space, so we can increase it. Something like this, 1.2 is enough. And then we're gonna increase the number to a couple of more, and we can make it a little bit bigger. And we can also make the plane a bit higher. So go to X-ray mode by Alt and Z, go to 1 and select these top vertices and G and Z to move it up. And let's make this edge here bigger too, and just kinda eyeballing it, so I think this should be good. And we can select these two edges again and G and X. So we have some space here. Let's make this a bit bigger again. Let's first apply the array modifier, so Ctrl and A, and click on this little eyedrop and select your circle, and then Ctrl A to apply the modifier. And then we can hide the circles and we can move it up. And what we can do next is make the water, so just a plane, and scale it way up. And we can go to edge select and select this edge and G and Y and just make it very big. And now we're gonna add a camera, Shift A and camera and G and Y and move it up. And Alt and R to reset the rotation and Rx and 90. And then Ctrl 0 to go to your camera. And we can click on this little lock here and move our camera. So let's move it a bit like this. And we also can make the focal length a bit bigger like this. And let's open a new window, so just drag it like this to the left. And press T to hide this menu and hide your overlays like this. And now we can move the camera more around and we can move it a bit down. And a bit more to the right. And now we can make a mattress, so let's select a cube, move it up. And let's move it around a bit. Go to edit mode and select everything and press S and Shift and Z to just scale it on the Y and X axis. So maybe something like this, and go to face select and let's make this smaller. And it's also a bit too big, so let's select this face and G and Y. And let's place it. This looks a little bit too big, so we can scale it more. So select everything and again S and Shift and Z to make it a bit smaller. And let's select the mattress again and Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision. And again let's make a loop cut and scale it to the edges and one in the other direction, so something like this, and scale it up. And then it looks like this, and don't forget to shade it smooth. And what you can do next is the blanket here. So you can move your 3D cursor to your mattress, so Shift S and cursor to select it and select a plane. Let's move it up to see it. And now we can subdivide it. So right click and subdivide. And let's subdivide it by 10 times. And let's extrude it a little bit to have more air inside. So just a tiny bit is enough. And then go to select and sharp edges and S, C and 0. And then select this edge and E and Y, just extruding a bit. And then select the other edge, but not the last one here. And then E and X, just a little bit. And then go to 7 and edge select and select these edges and delete them. So just X and edges. And then we're gonna add a array modifier, so array. And it looks a little bit too big, so let's make it smaller. And let's move it over on the X-axis. So I think 9 should be enough. And then we're gonna add another array modifier. And this time make the X-axis 0 and -1 on the Y-axis. Maybe 7 is enough, so we have a blanket. And check merge on both array modifiers. And we can apply them. So Control A, and then we have this blanket. And next go to your physics tab and select cloth. And then just scroll down and select pressure. And we can make it 5. Then go to shape and check sewing. And what we have to do first, before we press play, we have to go to edit mode, select everything and merge by distance. So just M and merge by distance. So we don't have these extra vertices. And we can also remove these edges here, so 7. Select your edge, select and just drag it like this. And X edges, also the other one, X and edges. And now we can play it. So I think the sewing is a little bit too much, so we can reduce it a bit. So I think 1 is enough. And we also should check self-collision. So go to collision and self-collision, and let's play it again. We can also shade it smooth. Let's bring the pressure back to 5 and the sewing to 2. So I think this should be good. And what we have to do is move it a bit around so it is not just flat and looks boring. So let's go to edit mode and edge select or vertex select and just select something random and go to your proportional editing. Just click it or press O on your keyboard and then just G and move it around. So something like this is good. And then we can select one here and move it like this. So just some variations. So your blanket can look something like this and we can play it. And what we forgot is to make a collision. So let's make a collision object. Let's move the blanket a bit more down so it falls on the mattress. And let's play it. We can scale it up a bit later. So let's first apply the cloth modifier by pressing Ctrl A or just here and apply. And let's make the blanket bigger. And we can move it up a bit. And we can also add a subdivision, so Ctrl 2, and then we have a subdivision and it looks much better. And let's move it a bit more on the X-axis so we can make some pillows here. So Ctrl A and plane. Let's subdivide it again by 10 times. And E to extrude it a bit. Select sharp edges and S, C and 0. And let's go to physics again and cloth. And the mass can be 0.01. And let's go to pressure. And the pressure can be 10. And let's also check self-collision and put it to 0.001. And go to 0 on your timeline and let's play it again. I think we have to subdivide it a bit more, so let's subdivide it again. And then we can play it again. I don't know why it jumps like this, but okay. And then we can shade it smooth. We can go to modifiers and apply the cloth modifier. And then right click and set origin to geometry. And then S and Z to make it more flat. And then we can just move it down and onto the bed. And we can also rotate it a bit and move it. And let's duplicate it by Shift D and then move it over and rotate it again and make it a bit bigger. And then the bed is finished. And next we can do the curtains. So let's select a plane, R, X and 90. And move it up and let's make it bigger. And we have to make it big on the X-axis, so S and X. And then we have to subdivide it, so subdivide. Let's subdivide it by 50 times. Select this edge by holding Alt and left click. And then we're gonna go to our vertex select and we're gonna create a new one and assign it. And next we're gonna open a curve and a path curve and move it up. And we can go to edit mode and make it bigger. And then we're gonna select the curtains again and go to constraints and copy scale. And then you're gonna select our curve and X-axis. And then we move our timeline back and select the plane. And let's go to cloth again and cloth. And you can select silk and also check self-collision. Let's go to shape and pin group and select your group. And then we're gonna play it and select this curve and then play it and S and X. So we have something like this, and we can shade it smooth. And then we can just apply the modifier, so Ctrl A to apply the cloth, and also the constraints, so let's apply it, and we can delete the curve. And then we have our curtains, and we can add a solidify, and you can make it very thin by just 0.001. This should be enough. You can also add a subdivision, so Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision, and then we can just place it onto this wall here. And you can also scale it if it's not big enough, so S and Z. And don't forget to auto smooth this object here, so auto smooth. You can add a palm tree, so here I made it myself, or you can just search it here by palm, and you can just free first. I selected this one, but I didn't really like it so much, so we could make one ourselves. You can skip this part if you just want to use this one. So what I did is select a curve, let's select a path, and let's bring it over and rotate it and go to edit mode. Let's go to O, proportional editing, and just scale it something like this and extrude it a bit. You can give it some thickness by going to the curve property and scroll down and go to geometry and bevel, and let's give it some thickness, so maybe something like 0.7 is good. We can also fill caps. Select this point and Alt and S to make it smaller on the points. And what we can do next is go to edit mode, select this point and Shift S and cursor to select it, and go back and right click, set origin to 3D cursor, and then Shift D and move it up, and then we can make some variations. Just make some variations so it looks a bit different than the other parts, and Shift D again and move it up and rotate it. And we can make one shorter than the other one. And we can move this a bit more down. And let's also make a short one so it looks more natural. So just scale it down and rotate it. And once you're happy with your result, we can move on. So we can just select everything of these branches to join them. So Ctrl J. What we have to do first is convert it to a mesh. And let's go to particle system, add a new one, and go to hair. And then we can decrease the length a little bit. And the segments, 3 segments is enough. And then we can go to hair shape. The root can be 3 and the tip to something like 1. And we can go to children and choose interpolated. Something like 30 is enough. And then we can go to roughness and just move the values a little bit up. So some randomness and threshold, the size. And then you can clump the ends. And you can also change the shape. So something like this. And then we can go to particle edit and edit these hairs. So go to strength and move it up. And what we also can do is the pathing here, so we can choose path and just a little bit clicking here and there, and then we have some variations, so something like this. And let's go back, and now it looks more like a palm tree. And we can also make these hairs a little bit more shorter, so let's go back, and here's the length, and we can shrink it maybe a little bit so it is not too long. Now we have everything set up and we can make the materials. So let's choose shader editor and press N to hide this menu, and then we can come up here and then we can choose this material preview and also here. And what we can do first is set up the lighting. So if you go here to render view, we can't see anything, so it's pretty dark. So let's click this yellow dot and select environment texture and open your HDRI. So I choose the beach HDRI. I think it looks pretty natural and very nice. And now we can go to world and don't forget your node wrangler and click this node and Ctrl T, and then we have the Z rotation and we can just rotate it on the Z axis, so something like this. and it is way too bright, so we can decrease it a bit. So I think 0.3 or 0.4 is enough, and then we can rotate it some more. So this looks pretty good, and then we can move it more up. 0.4 should be good, and then let's move the palm tree a bit more. So G and X, so it is more out the way, and we have to bring the camera a bit more in, so we can do that. So G and Y, and we can also make the palm tree a bit bigger, so let's scale it more up, and we can rotate it if you want, and G and X to move it more on the side. So this should be good. And let's also move this wall a bit on the x-axis, so something like this. And we also should add a sun, so let's add a sun. So light and sun, and move it here and just rotate it. And let's make it brighter, so select the slide bulb here, and let's make it a 5. And what I choose in this picture here is the very red color, so it matches the background. So just something reddish, so something like this. You can make it a bit darker, and so I think this should be good. And what we also can do is Ctrl B, so we have just this frame here. And let's make the water, so let's select the water and go back to object and new and name it water. And what I did in this picture is just a metallic. Because of the reflection, I think it looks better with the reflections. And roughness all the way down. And then let's add a bump and connect it to the normal. And also let's select a noise texture and connect the color into the height, and then we can increase it a lot, and it is way too strong, so we can set it to 0.2, and this should be enough. And let's increase our scale and also some detail. And now we can add some color, so let's add some color, something blue. And you can make it pretty saturated because it is not so strong here. Change the alpha to something like 0.9. And what I did to not see this background here is you can move the water a bit on the x-axis. So let's select the blankets and the pillow and the mattress together with the water, and R and X just a tiny bit like this, and then it looks much better. And I think the HDRI looks better with 0.3. If you want, you can also make a water material, so you can make this metallic down and you can make the transmission up, and then it looks like this. So here I did a metallic texture, so you have nice reflections, and also from the background, but you can also make it water texture. And let's move on to the palm tree. So let's select a new, and we can leave the roughness, and what I did here is Shift A, and let's add a light path and connect the camera ray to alpha, so it looks not so strong. And you can also give it some transmission if you want, so something like this. And we can also give it some color, so something like a purple color if you want, or you can choose whatever you like. Something like this looks good. And let's move the saturation a bit more down, and let's add a color to this wall here, so new, and name it glass. And let's choose something like a purple color, and the saturation a bit more down. And also I think the sun is a bit too strong, so the color of the sun is too strong, so we can decrease it a little bit. We can select the curtains and move it a bit more on the left side, and you can also make it a bit more narrow if you want, so S and X. And let's select the glass again and make the roughness to 0.2, and also the transmission all the way up, so it looks like glass. And let's make the materials for the blanket and the rest. So let's select the blanket and new, and let's name it blanket. And we can leave the roughness pretty high, or you can leave it at 0.5. And we also can give it some subsurface. And then we're gonna add a bump texture. So bump. And connect it to the normal and a noise texture. And also a color ramp. Connect the color to the height and the factor to the factor. And let's select the noise texture and Ctrl T and connect the object to the vector. And then we can decrease it a little bit. And let's make this value a bit more up, and we can give it some detail, and let's make this color a bit darker and this color also a bit darker, and put the strength to 0.1. This should be enough. So we can just see a little bit of a bump, and then we can give it some colors. So let's make again a purple color, And then we can select the pillows and the mattress and lastly the blanket and Ctrl L and link materials. And I think this looks pretty good, and we can make it maybe a little bit more lighter. And now we can move on to the curtains. So let's select the curtain, and for that I have my material library. So I think this is an add-on from Blender. You can go to edit and preferences and search it, and then you check it, and then you can have this material library, and then you can just save your materials. I have saved mine. I can go to clothes, and here I can choose dress, so it's the same as a curtain material, and I can choose apply to selected. So here you see apply to selected. So what I have for the curtains material, so first I have an edge shader and a translucent BSDF and connected to the second shader, and then a principled, and the transmission is set to 0.5, and the alpha is connected to a mixed color, and then we have an invert color and it's connected to A, and then we have a brick texture. So you can just go to Shift A and type in brick texture, and then it comes up, and connect the color to the color of the invert color. The offset is set to 0.5, frequency 2, the squash is set to 0.2 and frequency is to 1, and the scale is to 5. And then just a mapping and connect the UV to the vector and the vector to the vector. And then the mix is connected to a vector, and the vector of the mix node is then connected to an RGB curve. And here you can see I changed some values, so you can add one just by clicking it. And then connect the color to a layer weight, blend to 0.5, connect the facing to the color. And that's pretty much it for the curtain material, so you can just copy it. And lastly we can just play around more with the lighting and everything. Make this maybe a bit darker. And what I also did is add some orbs, so glass orbs. If you want you can add some too, so Shift A and mesh, and just an UV sphere, and just move it on your mattress and scale it down and shade it smooth, and then just new and bring the roughness all the way down and the transmission all the way up. And then we have our sphere, and we can make another one by duplicating it by Shift D and move it over, and maybe another one on the other side, make it slightly bigger. And now to the render settings. For the render settings I have cycles and GPU compute, and the render you can set 300 samples or 200, and denoise, and you can choose use GPU, and the light tree you can turn off and go to performance and just select everything, and also check persistent data. And for the color management I have set it to AGX. This looks the best. If you move it to filmic it looks more yellow like this. I think this also looks very good, but AGX looks the best in my opinion. I set it to very high contrast. You can set it to none and add it in compositing if you want, and then you can make some tweakings until you find something you like. If you want a sun in the background you can move the HDRI, so you can move it more, and then you have something like this. So just choose something you like, and then you can just press F12 to render it, or you can go up here and render image. And then we can move on to pixel R and do some compositing. Go to adjust, bring the vibrance a little bit up, and more saturation if you want, but I think this is more than enough. And put the smooth all the way, and we can give it some bloom and just a tiny bit dehaze, and let's compare it. And that's it for this tutorial. Please like this video if it was helpful and if you could learn something, and I see you in the next one. Bye!